for me, if it's about bringing home as much hardware as you possibly can, even though from time to time there are practical considerations for doing that. Having been a high school band director, I think I have a pretty good understanding of all of those things. But I'd like to think that on some level, I tried to communicate as best we can that the goal was to do our best, to put our best foot forward, to always do it the right way and a healthy way, and let everything take care of itself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and teachers in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Corey Pompey. Hi, Corey.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. This time I put the recorder on so we can continue with the interview. And Corey, could you take a moment and tell the listeners who you are and what you're doing right now?
My name is Corey Pompey. I'm the Director of Athletic Bands and Associate Director of Bands at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I am in my first year. I've only been on the job since July, so everything's a new experience for me at this point.
So I did meet you at Midwest, and from the moment I met you and we talked, I think you and I and DeMondre Thurman were there, and I knew I wanted to have you on the show, and I'm glad I could get you here.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the introduction from DeMondre. At that point, I had listened to several episodes of the Everything Band podcast already, so it was great to be able to put a face with the name.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. I don't know how many interviews. I think I do about 50 interviews a year. I think about 15 of them start in the Marble Bar at the Hilton.
There's a lot of business that takes place at the Marble Bar, isn't there?
There sure is. All right, Corey, can you tell everyone about your musical background? How did you get your start in music? What instrument do you play? That kind of thing.
I got my start in music when I was in the fourth grade, product of the public schools, and they had a string music program. And so I started with the violin. I didn't stick with the violin, and then I quickly moved to cello. Moved to cello from the violin because I couldn't understand why they were teaching us how to play violin standing up when I see orchestras on television and the violinist is sitting down. So I wanted to sit down. So, the cello came open. I moved there. Did that for a short amount of time, and that was all that was available to me. It's not necessarily that I wanted to be a string player. That's what was available. Well, shortly after that, there was a program for us to learn how to play a band instrument. Now, this is before middle school band, mind you. And so I started playing the trumpet. And once again, I was not necessarily interested in playing the trumpet, but that's what they had on hand. So I did that and finally got to sixth grade band and played the instrument that I wanted to play from the beginning, which is the saxophone. So I am a saxophonist. And that's how I got my start in music in fourth grade.
Wow. So you started on the violin, cello, trumpet, and finally saxophone.
That is correct.
So when you finally started the saxophone, how much of that previous training did you lean on to learn the sax?
In terms of being able to read music a little bit, I was able to lean on that. We started learning to read music when I was taught trumpet. With the string program, the methodology that they used, we weren't reading music. It was a combination of long and short and fingerings and different things like that.
Was it Suzuki or was it a hybrid or something else?
It was probably a hybrid. This was an outside music program, so I suppose it was probably privately funded, and they would go into the elementary schools once a week and teach people music and different things like that. And they had different levels. So this would have been the beginning level. Now, had I stuck with it, I would have ended up in an orchestra, and I would have been reading music and different things like that. But I didn't stick with it.
So how about early teachers? When you finally got on the saxophone, do you remember anyone who was really influential?
At the risk of sounding ungrateful, I can't say I had anyone that was extremely influential until I got to college. And for me, that's where my formative musical experiences really began. My teachers were wonderful human beings, all great people. But when one thinks of the great band programs,
sure,
that was not my experience.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. I was just thinking about this the other day because I met a band director who came out of Mr. Watkins' program. And so, I always think about this when I meet band directors, often they have either drum corps, DCI experience, or they come out of one of these great, terrific programs. But yet I know that many just come out of average programs like I did and you did, sounds like you did. And so I don't know, maybe I'm fishing down the wrong hole here, but what do you think about that? Is there something to be said for coming from a big program?
Let me put it this way. When I started at the University of Alabama, I felt like I was behind.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think there's something to be said coming out of, I suppose the program doesn't have to be big,
sure,
but I think there's something to be said for coming out of a great program, certainly.
Maybe like a head start of some kind.
Yeah, and we're talking, and the programs I'm talking about, in Birmingham, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. When I say I'm from Birmingham, that means I'm from Birmingham. A lot of times you'll hear people say they're from Birmingham, but they're not from Birmingham. They're from what we call over the mountain. And so the really great band programs in the area, for the most part, were over the mountain. So when I got to the University of Alabama, I found myself thinking, well, it must have been really nice to come from one of those programs and to have had the experiences that those students had. And when I look back on my time at the University of Alabama, that's where they went to recruit students. Alabama did not come to my high school to recruit. So I ended up at Alabama through a unique set of circumstances.
All right, Corey, how about the moment that you decided that you were going to pursue a career in music?
It just felt right. I didn't think that I would be a music educator. Now, this is going to sound crazy. I did go to school as a music educator, but I didn't think that I would be a music educator. And I would say fairly early on, I would say probably by the end of the first semester, I made the decision that I was going to stick with it. But I didn't go in with that attitude or that mindset.
So you mentioned that you had your formative experience when you got to the University of Alabama. You want to tell me about that?
That was the first time I heard what a classical saxophone sounds like. That was the first time that I heard a fine band. The first time that I was in a first class marching band. And this is not to put down my middle school experiences or my high school experiences, but certainly my college experience was very, very different. I was not exposed to those things as a high school student. On CD when it comes to the bands, not the classical saxophone, though. That was totally new to me, and I didn't know what I didn't know. So that first semester was really, really, really eye opening for me.
Did you march in the $1 Million Band?
I did.
How many years did you do that?
I did it for 5 years.
Wow, the whole way as a music major.
Yes.
Is that common at Alabama?
Well, there were several of us that did it. At the time, I guess you could say it was common. Yeah, I did, let's see, 3 years as a saxophone player and 4 years, 4 and 5, were as a drum major.
Yeah, so there we go. It's the drum major part of the equation.
Yeah, that fifth year, the reason there was a year 5 is probably because I could be drum major again.
Mm-hmm. This has come up a lot on the show. A lot of the people that I talked to were drum majors of their college bands. And so what was that experience as a drum major of the University of Alabama marching band like, and how did it shape you in your current role?
An opportunity to lead, a lot of people. But at the time, I didn't think about it all too deeply. It was an opportunity to conduct, which was something that I was interested in, and that was an avenue that allowed me to do it. And so, there are the friendships that you have and all of those things. So all of that played a role in what I was doing. Now, in terms of how it shaped me now, it's given me a perspective to be able to talk to student leaders from firsthand experience. And so I have found that to be useful, although my student leaders don't know about my background as a drum major. I kind of keep that to myself.
Well, let's see if we can't broadcast it here on the podcast.
Well, I suppose, if you dig deep enough, you'll find it. but when I'm talking to my students, it doesn't come up.
So we're going to get to the University of Wisconsin, but before we do that, can you tell me about your teaching? And so did you have more than one job or just one position?
I had 2 positions, 3, depending on how you look at it. So I was at one place for 5 years. I started off in a school that was 7 through 12, where I was the assistant director. In year 5, a new high school was built. So you had the 9 through 12 campus and 6 through 8 campus. When those campuses split, I became the middle school director, but I was still assisting at the high school. So that's why I say two positions you could, really it's all the same thing as far as I'm concerned, but you could make the argument that that was two different positions. After that, I went to another high school where I was the director there for 2 years.
And so, what did you learn in those positions? What might you want to share with the listeners about those jobs?
Well, the thing that I learned is that not all communities are the same. Now, you hear people, and I might get in trouble for this, but you hear people say that all kids are the same. I'm not convinced that that's true. Now, certainly, when you start talking about the hierarchy of needs and all of those things, yes, there are commonalities there, but I am convinced that students are a product of their surroundings. And that certainly was the case for me at both of those places that I've been. And this is not to say that one was better or worse, but they were different.
Yeah, this is a risky topic for me, of course, anytime that I open my mouth on these things. But, we do have different cultures in this country. And when we don't acknowledge the differences and we try to gloss over them, I think we run the risk of damaging how we can help people.
You're absolutely right about that. I agree 100%.
Obviously, if you went from teaching high school to getting a doctorate at the University of Texas, you were doing things well at that school. And so can you talk about the kind of success that you were having before you went to Texas?
Well, one can debate whether or not I was having great success.
You're too humble, Corey.
Oh, I'm dead serious.
Okay.
We did okay. It was a small program, less than 1,000 students at the high school. So it was a small program, and in terms of what we were doing with the marching band, we did have some success with the different competitions we were going to. Now, we weren't doing BOA and all of those kinds of things. But where we did go, for the most part, we had success. Now, my second year, I did something that came back to bite me. But for the most part, we had success. And at least as far as Alabama's concerned, in the rubric when you go to your festivals and different things like that, we had success there. So by those measures, we were successful.
Sure. What part of Alabama were you in?
I was in, it wasn't Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's Tuscaloosa County, about 20 minutes outside of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That was my second job. My first job was in the suburb of Birmingham.
All right, Corey. So after teaching high school, you left and you got a doctorate at the University of Texas with Jerry Junkin. What was that experience like?
Mind-blowing. It was unlike any other experience that I have had up until that point. I must say, the University of Texas and what's going on there in the music program, specifically in my case, what's going on there with bands was it's a really special place. And it meant a lot for me to be there. And I learned a great deal from him. And not just him, but my other professors, the other band faculty, and my colleagues that were graduate students with me. Just the fact that I was in an environment with all of those people. Certainly, Junkin was a huge part of it. But then there are his colleagues that were on the band faculty, and my colleagues that were TAs with me. It's just a special environment to be in. I must say, it was really something.
Yeah, I bet. And so now, after you finish your doctorate at Texas, I noticed that you went to Penn State first, your first gig.
Yes, that was my first gig.
Man, so you've been involved with the bands at the University of Alabama, at the University of Texas, at Penn State, and now Wisconsin. And I'm not forgetting Nevada, which is also in there. But man, this is incredible, that the size of the programs that you've been involved with, and sort of like the historical importance of them in college football.
Well, it's crazy. I certainly it's crazy. There's just no other way to say it. I am well aware that I'm incredibly blessed to have been in this position, and I'm incredibly grateful for it, and not entirely sure that I'm deserving, but I'm grateful nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to follow this up with a question for all my listeners who are involved in marching band. What are the commonalities that you found in all of these big university marching programs? What are the ingredients for a successful program that are true to every place?
Well, you've got to have great teaching. If you don't have great teaching, then the marching band won't be successful. Certainly at these places that I've been, has been, and there is a long tradition of marching bands. And so in each one of these places, you have young children growing up whose dream is to be in that organization. So that's a big part of it. They're well supported. And they have the backing of the institution that they represent, which is also an important ingredient for success. Because let's face it, the collegiate marching band is an expensive endeavor.
Yeah, sure.
Without the support of these institutions, it would be very hard to maintain any level of quality. Each of these places also have a strong alumni base. So there are a lot of things that go into making these places successful.
So what is the role of the marching band, do you think, in the university community beyond just the football game?
It's a point of pride. The university has this successful organization that it can tout and show and demonstrate as a model of success. It's also an opportunity to expose a whole lot of people to music at one time, which is unique compared to the other offerings that an institution may present. It also gives students a wonderful social outlet as well. So really, the role of the collegiate marching band is multidimensional. I could go on and on. Obviously there are musical things that are important, but the extra musical things are just as important too.
So what are those extra musical things? I mean, is there something specific you have in mind?
The ability to be with a great group of people. The sense of community that the marching band fosters. Just this morning, I was speaking with a young lady who met her husband in this band. Now, that's not uncommon, but it goes to illustrate the different ways that marching band can impact one's life.
Yeah, this idea of band being community comes up a lot in the show, because I think almost all of us have the experience of being in band, whether it's in high school or middle school, and having it be a place that's safe and a place where we feel welcome. And I don't know if you want to expound on that idea of what we can do to help foster that community, build those relationships.
I think some of that is inherently built into the program. I'm sure there are people that can talk about this much more eloquently than I can. But when I think of my current situation, we spend so much time together. We just get to know each other really, really well. And these friendships develop across the band and within sections. So I think a huge part of it is because of what we do. I also think that fostering the sense of community also has to come from the director too. I mean, we have to encourage everybody to help to foster the sense of community. If one does not do that, then negative things can happen. So there is a certain amount of guidance that has to come from the top.
So, Corey, I want to talk about the program at Wisconsin, but I don't want to shortchange the fact that you were the head band director at the University of Nevada. What was that experience like? Because you grew up in the Southeast, and Reno, Nevada is very different from Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes, indeed. I was the associate band director at the University of Nevada, Reno, and it indeed was a different experience for me. I enjoyed it a lot, but the West Coast is very different from the South.
Sure, yeah. So what about that? What differences do you notice in, say, the music making or the band programs? I mean, it's not that anything's worse, because there's some terrific bands on the West Coast. But it's just different. It's done differently.
Yeah. There were quality band programs in Reno, and some wonderful, wonderful programs in Las Vegas. So in terms of the music making, I wouldn't say it's hugely, hugely different. I mean, you've got great teachers in both places. And so, these great teachers made really, really great programs. They were playing, the standard literature and newer literature in Reno and Las Vegas in Las Vegas. For me, the differences were more cultural than anything else. Although I will say, when it comes to the collegiate marching band, I did notice a difference between Nevada and, say, the East Coast or the Midwest, just in terms of the numbers of people that participate in the activity. I remember we went on a recruiting trip in Las Vegas, and this was early in my tenure there. And I'm standing up in front of the band and I'm giving the spiel, and the people seem to be engaged and different things like that. And then I ask, how many of you like football? And I asked it really enthusiastically, thinking that I would get a nice response. Crickets.
Yep.
Maybe two hands in the air.
Yeah.
Now, if I go recruiting in Birmingham, Alabama, or for that matter, anywhere in Alabama, or if I go recruiting outside of Madison and throughout the state of Wisconsin, and again, Midwest, if I ask those students, how many of you like football? You're going to have a lot of hands.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're going to have a lot of students in those band programs that want to go on and do collegiate marching band.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one difference there. But the students that did do marching band at Nevada, they were dedicated and they were wonderful. But there was a difference in the overall number of people that would graduate high school and go on to do that activity, for sure.
All right, Corey. So let's talk about the program at Wisconsin and your new job. So you assumed the mantle this year and you're taking over for a legend, right? Mike Leckrone?
Yes.
What's this been like for you? And what does your program look like?
It's been a lovely experience. And I don't know that I had any expectations coming into it, to be honest with you. I hoped things would go well. We planned so that things would go well. But at the end of the day, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how that goes. We've got about 300 kids in the marching band.
Mm-hmm.
We do football, volleyball, men's and women's basketball, men's hockey, and when we can, we do women's hockey.
Wow.
So there are a lot of sports that we're performing for. And in addition to different things that may come up through the year when we have to create a group or get a collection of people to go out and do something. The band programs got a wind ensemble, a concert band, and 3 university bands. So there's a lot of music making going on here.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of graduate assistants that help with all these different sporting events that you're doing?
We do have a lot of graduate assistants, and that's something that happened just before I got here. So it's a recent addition to our program, but a great addition.
And the Wisconsin School of Music is terrific. Do you teach any classes?
I've got a conducting class, and in the spring I will do the concert band.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Now, the hope is that, again, knock on wood, the hope is that in the future, I will do concert band, both in the fall and in the spring. And that was certainly part of the discussions when I took the job. Right now, the concert band rehearses at the same time as the marching band.
Yeah. And so the logistics of running a marching band with 350 students seem overwhelming to me. How do you manage that?
How do I manage it? Well, the reality of it is I am the person at the top of the program, but I cannot do it alone. And so we manage it with the help of a fantastic assistant director, Darren Olson. And we do it with the help of 7 fantastic teaching assistants. And then we've got our administrators and the staff people within the School of Music. All of these people contribute to our success. And if I started going down the line for each of those people, it would take the rest of the podcast. but that's how we manage it. And the student staff, office workers, Oh, it goes on and on. And so it's a lot of uh, no, that's my fault. I'm sorry. It's a lot of just making sure that the lines of communication are open, and making sure that one is staying on top of those things. And so between the administrators and the assistant director and I, we try to keep this thing afloat as best we can.
Mm-hmm. So
student leadership, I failed to mention how important that is.
So forgive me, because I am not much of a marching person. I did it for 2 years in college, and then that was the last experience. I never taught at a high school with a marching band. And so when you took over at Wisconsin, was it a different style of marching than you're used to, or is that something that you'd been familiar with?
It's a different style in that the way that we march here at Wisconsin is like anywhere else. There's nobody that marches like us. So yes, in that way, I was not used to it. But because of my experiences at Penn State, and to a degree my experiences in high school, it's you could say that the way we march in here at Wisconsin is a variation of the high step that you'll find throughout the Big Ten.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So yes, it's different than the way everyone else does it. But I can start with that, and from that learn the particulars of the way we do it.
So how about taking over for Mike Leckrone after he was there for 50 years? Surely that's a difficult transition. And I'm just wondering what your philosophy is as you approach this.
My philosophy is to do no harm.
It's great advice.
So far the transition has been okay. As I approach different things, I try to keep everything in perspective. I'm going to let the Wisconsin band be the Wisconsin band, and where I can help things, I will help them. I'm not interested in reinventing the wheel. I am certainly of the opinion if I try to reinvent the wheel, I might not be here very long. So
you're probably right.
My goal is to maintain the traditions and things that I can help improve. I'll help improve those things, and that's kind of my philosophy as I've approached this transition.
Right. And so who is the keeper of those traditions? Is it the students? Is it the alumni? How does that get passed along?
All of the above.
So are you, if you do want to make any changes, are you going through the students first?
Sometimes the leadership team, and any changes that have been made haven't been radical, so it hasn't been an issue. Sometimes I just do it, and it happens, and we've got great students. And so, everyone around here has been clear and understands that I'm different from Mike and that there will be change. And so there was a healthy expectation that some things would change. So from that perspective, things have been okay. Sometimes I'll ask colleagues, about certain things. If we do this, do you think it would be a great idea? if it's a good idea, they'll say so. If we might need to think about things, we'll think about things. So it's a give and take, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I think that's good advice and wise for anyone who's taken over a new program, whether it's an elementary school band or a university band.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and not only that, but I don't know enough to try to go in and start reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, there's a well-established culture there.
Yeah, I think it would serve me well and perhaps others well to just sit back and learn the culture, see how things work, and go from there.
Yeah, I imagine being ahead of a program that big, I imagine it's a little bit like steering a cruise ship, right? You just make small changes and try to nudge it in a direction a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And from my perspective, if it's as long as we're not breaking any rules, we're following university policy, everyone's safe. As long as we're doing those things, I can have the patience to steer.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Yep. Completely. So, Corey, how about hard-earned lessons in your career? What have you learned that maybe we could save some music teacher out there from making that same mistake?
You have to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a mistake that I made early in my career, and I do believe it cost me a little bit. I tried to be someone else, and that did not work for me. I'm kind of a middle of the road guy. I don't like to raise my voice. I'm not, I wouldn't say there's much of an edge about me. And I'm very much, I ask you to do something, please do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you don't do it, then we have to figure out some ways or some strategies to get you to do what you need to do.
Right.
Well, early in my career, I don't know that was me.
Mm-hmm.
I ask you to do something, you don't do it, then I would yell.
Uh-huh. Yeah, young teacher.
in different things like that. And part of it, honestly, was a part of it was my surroundings. And so, that was a mistake. And by surroundings, I just meant the culture as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I'm in an environment, I ask you to do something, you don't do it. Rather than yell, we create strategies to try to get you to do what needs to be done. But when you do that, it takes a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Whereas yelling was a little bit more expedient at times. So,
I teach 10 and 11-year-olds. I have raised my voice once or twice.
Yeah, and we all do. And I certainly, I'm not saying that it's okay, but that happens from time to time. But I would say early in my career that was a default.
Sure, yeah.
You have to meet the students where they are and try to guide them to where you need them to be. So that's some advice that I would give people. I think there's something to be said for having patience, and really guiding students to where they need to be. And for some people, they could walk in the room and say, "You're too patient." Well, this is how I'm approaching it, and you approach it the way you want to approach it.
All right, Corey, are you ready to go on to the starred questions here?
Bring them on. I don't know that I have an answer for you, but I'm ready.
These are the big philosophical questions I ask all of my guests.
Yes.
All right, Corey, and the first of these questions is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
For me, it's a question of one's motivation. I think that's where I would draw the line. Obviously, there is a place for competition in what we do, but for me, when it becomes about something other than the music making, that's when I get concerned. Uh, I think it's more important to be process oriented. And if if the process that you use is geared towards making music at a high level, and doing it because you value music for what it can bring to you, and you happen to get trophies while you're doing it, great. But for me personally, if the goal is to get the trophy, then I have concerns about that.
All right, Corey, this is an interesting question because I know that a lot of music teachers, they identify with their jobs and they have a great time doing what they do. So it's hard to turn, the line gets blurred. But how do we find a work-life balance as music educators?
I don't know the answer to that because I can tell you that right now I do not have a healthy work life balance. Uh, but I'm doing the best that I can. But there are things that have to get done. My job depends on it, and so there is some sacrifice there. Sacrifice for me and sacrifice from my wife because she has a husband that's not always as engaged as he needs to be because he's running this program. Uh, um, but my hope is that once the season's over, we can find downtime to connect. And I suppose in the middle of the season, when there's a break, you find opportunities to refresh your batteries and different things like that. But I'm the last person to be talking about work life balance. That's for sure. But I guess you do the best that you can. And there are some people who are really, really, really good at that. And I'm not one of them because I'm always thinking about something. So when I'm at work, I'm thinking about how I probably should be worried about what's going on at my home life. Well, when I'm at home tending to that, I'm thinking about something that needs to be done at work. So it's not good. I'm a work in progress. Let's put it that way.
This is a big question, and I get a lot of different answers. What are the challenges facing music education, and how can we best meet them?
For me, I think it's access. Creating the conditions for all students to have the opportunity to experience music. I think that's the challenge. And to make it relevant to them too is a huge challenge. And the best way to meet those challenges, it's through advocacy and talking to the decision makers about how important it is to have music. And for those people who can't do it for themselves, it would be helpful for someone to come in and do it for them. That's the big challenge. And as I sit here answering your question, I'm thinking about the situation that I'm currently in, where someone sent me an email, and unfortunately, because of my schedule, I just haven't had the opportunity to respond or help in the way that I would like. But it was about young students not having access to music education and the principal not having an interest in giving them access to music education with the argument that it's not relevant to them. And I find that troubling that there are enough people who don't find value in what we do. And so somehow we have to communicate that there is value in what we do and that it is important. Even if you don't go out and do it as a profession, that doesn't mean it's less valuable. And, I'm a firm believer in music for music's sake. And I believe that to my core. However, when we're dealing with people that don't necessarily understand that, then I think it's helpful to communicate the benefits of studying music that don't necessarily have anything to do. That's a product of studying music that's extra musical, I guess is how I would phrase it.
All right, Corey, if I could give you a time machine and take you back to your high school graduation, what would you tell yourself?
One thing I think that I would tell myself is to slow down. It's silly to say that one was too focused, but in some ways, my undergraduate days were jam-packed, and perhaps I should have taken a little bit more time to do more and do it better and not be in a hurry to get out of there so I could go get a job. And I say that if you were to put me back there, would I do things differently? Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know.
That's sort of like the thing that's left unsaid in all of these, is that we would all probably just repeat the same things again because we're wired a certain way.
Absolutely. Right.
So, Corey, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you'd want to conduct or play in or participate in?
I have a great affinity for the suite in E flat.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me happy. And so if it's going to be the last thing, I suppose it needs to be something that's going to make me happy.
The first suite in E flat.
That's a good contender.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as that comes out of my mouth, I'm thinking about other things too.
So is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
I'm happy to say that the Meade Witter School of Music is getting ready to formally open a building in October, the Hamel Music Center. So there's going to be a great weekend of music making. And if your listeners happen to hear this before that, and they're nearby, come on over to the University of Wisconsin and experience this new building. We've got new rehearsal spaces, new recital hall, a new concert hall with the latest technology. So we're all really, really, really excited about that.
All right, Corey, how can people get in touch with you?
You can get in contact with me through my email, Pompey at wisc.edu. That's Pompey at wisc.edu.
Excellent. Corey, thank you so much for your time.
Mark, it's been a real pleasure.